tomar cientos de aplicaciones que nuestros usuarios nos exigían, digamos, que los clientes necesitaban. Y lo que hicimos con eso fue tomar esos requerimientos y diseñar soluciones para ellos.
Con Responsive Web Design nosotros logramos que una misma aplicación ejecute bien en cualquier browser, de cualquier tamaño.
Todas estas características que hemos incorporado en la Evolution 3 se suman a un conjunto de características que hemos seguido evolucionando con GeneXus. Características orientadas en la interoperabilidad entre sistemas, interoperar con una base de datos, poder interoperar con servicios, poder interoperar con diferentes módulos escritos en diferentes lenguajes, como puede ser Java, C#, Ruby, etc.
La tecnología evoluciona cada segundo y GeneXus ha estado al frente del desarrollo de software por más de 25 años.
Nuestro paradigma es completamente diferente, no es un paradigma de tercera generación en donde el programador tiene que sentarse a programar cada uno de esos lenguajes, sino que es un paradigma basado en modelos, los cuales le dan un nivel de abstracción mayor y nos permite enfocarnos únicamente en la captura del conocimiento y no en la captura de código.
Es un orgullo poder presentarles GeneXus X Evolution 3, porque es la última y la más inteligente plataforma de desarrollo de software.
Sí, yo... Mira que nos activaron el... 4 minutos. ¿Quién? Hola, buenos días.
Good morning. Happy October. Obviously, this is October 1st. And of course, welcome to this. Thank you for getting up so early to join us this morning. Well, as you know, historically, we have a specific dynamic here. You are the people who raise the questions, comments, and we try to answer. Let us introduce ourselves very quickly. I'm Gaston Milano. I manage the development team. Carry on. Gustavo Brown. Specifier. Eugenio Garcia, managing Flow and Portable. Jorge Mastropietro. Jose Lamas, GX Service. Cristian Camuso, Development. Editors, in particular. Good morning, Federico Asato, development team, architecture, GeneXus architecture. I help in performance issues and whatever comes up. Morning, Juan Andresiana. I'm part of the development team. Morning, Gustavo Martinez, GX Query. Marco Crespino, generators. Guillermo Pasquero, iOS generator. I'm a special case. I'm generator. Nicolás Cardelino, web generator. Gonzalo Fernández, GX Flow. Daniel Mariño, development team. Oscar Fabricio, GX server team. Daniel Méndez, Ana Berta, GeneXus development environments. Alejandro Silva, I work in the area of generators. Fabián Tramuso, of generators. Ignacio Roqueta, I work for the Java generator. Sebastián Gómez, let you have the microphone, and then you can raise your question or make a comment, and we'll try to answer or further explain your issue. I'm Fernando Romeo from ACE. I noticed that you are insisting on security of web applications. I use the user control, I run it on the KB, and I was surprised because for the Excel templates. And wouldn't this be a contradiction to have the same tool that generates a security issue? The random, who can deal with that? What's maybe he refers to one of the tools we use? Please, the mic. Give me the microphone. Well, do you refer to the Excel export? Yes, when you generate comparter, you have the export for anything that you generate, and you use it with an Excel template that works with a random command. But on the other hand, the tool that checks security tells me that that is wrong. Okay, I understand. Yes, we have to check that. We'll have to look at it. We'll have to go and look at it. Yes, I was surprised because most of the problems that I had in terms of security control had to do with the use of the random function. So we need to check that. Yes, we'll, okay, the question is raised. Okay, our support team is taking note of that, and we'll deal with it.
Hola, Enrique Almeida.
Enrique Almeida from Uruguay. I just want to ask you about the prospects in terms of mobile objects. I understand that what you have is a first attempt or a first approach to the issue, but as we have already received upgrade 2, we should have something that we can actually use, that is actually useful, because this object is called to have some influence at many stages of the development cycle. It's going to be used also for different tasks. So do you have a perception? You have a perception of how the module is going to be used, but we would like to use it in a different way. So I think we should organize a workshop so as to bring the two approaches together and accelerate the procedure. Well, we agree that this is going to be very important. I use it personally. I use it a lot. We found some problems. We have improved those issues. I am using it, and maybe if you want, in terms of modules, the outstanding issues is with Windows, because many of the things we want to reorganize, we need to reorganize things with Windows. That's where we find it more complicated. But no doubt, coming together, meeting, and talking about this is something we can do. We have written down a few things, and we don't want to do things that we like but the users don't. Of course, that's very clear for us. But in particular, in some of the projects, we are doing this. Some people have used this, but not all cases have the same results. And we would like to learn about all cases. So it's a deal. We'll do something. We'll talk with you. We'll bring several companies together to see what you think about it. Even foreign companies should participate so that we can respond to your expectations. We have written some things. We have called other companies at some point in time. I think you were not there when we convened these companies, and we wrote down some ideas, but unfortunately we didn't work on those ideas yet. So there are things that we can do. Sometimes it's hard for us to incorporate things into evolutions. Stabilizing is not that easy. The first thing we want to do for evolution 3 is the Windows issue. How to make all the organization part, understanding the knowledge base, worked on modules. If you work on modules, that's something I can understand much better. This organizes the knowledge database. If you look at the modules diagrams and you see the interaction between public and private, just using that kind of modules is for us very important. I think that it is also important for the community. I guess we all agree on that. But then later on, we'll see. We have detected that many of the issues can be solved with modules. A set of problems around how we create the knowledge base and how we include new features will be solved through the modules. Of course, also through language. But the modules, we agree with you. So I hope that technology will give us the opportunity to do many, many of the things we want to do. And my second and last question. Navigation of objects is part of the knowledge we have on the application. Today, we keep them as a text file, XML. It's not well formatted. It's like a second-class citizen. It's something internal. Won't it be better to have this in a more visible way so that we can look at the navigation of an object and revise previous navigation patterns or compare, check errors and warnings of the objects? That is to say, keep a history, keep track of the history, because that's valuable information when we are developing. I fully agree with you. It's very useful. We have all the components separated so that we can do this. We have written down some things in this regard. You also have something. Okay, we should get together. Amin? It's a question for Enrique. Do you need it as you develop, or are you thinking as someone who is doing deploys? Enrique, this is a question for you. Well, if I make changes and I want to know how this affected another object, it's an organization, I want to see how this affected another given object, I don't know how it was before. I need to know how it was before. Is that clear? I add a new transaction. I do the build on, and I see that an object is regenerated, but I did not change it. I want to know how it looked before and how it is now. And at that point, I cannot do it. Now I cannot do it. That sort of thing, I cannot do it. And if you have a large knowledge base, that worries me, because sometimes you don't realize what you are changing. Regarding navigation, we have a table inside the knowledge base of KB that was designed to keep this kind of information, navigations that an object may have over time. And we have some difficulties. The same revision may have different navigations at different points in time. So, because there are objects that change, and it depends on the table, the structure, and because you have more than one generator, you may have more than one simultaneous navigation, and you have, this is when you have more than one generator. Yes, we have contemplated that in the case of several generators, but with the same generator having two navigations, that has not been solved yet. We need to study that. We need to keep it not in relation to the revision of the object, but in relation to organizations, and that does not depend on object revision. I was thinking that maybe we could also have this traceability through a GX server when you analyze the history of a version of a KB, to have that kind of information. I support Enrique. I did a rebuild on and found problems, and for any given reason I had to interrupt it and do it further on. When I close the ID, I lose everything that I have generated. So I want to keep that so that when I enter again, I look at the errors and I analyze the errors, and not when I finish the rebuild all. In particular, the mistakes and the wordings are kept in one of the versions. I think we have a new tool window, which is an error list, where we keep and save all these errors. Is it the tag that says last navigation? No, it's a tool window. It's new. It's separate. It's called error list. And here we save all the objects. Otherwise, you close the KB, open it again. It maintains the status of the errors and wording. It's something specific for your case. People would lose that, and then they thought they could never come back to that KB. They said, I lost my errors. You can keep all that. It's a step. We wanted you to be able to correct something automatically there, like creating an index, so you can stand there and create the index. There are other things that we have included. It would say error, and you can, if you don't want to look at it again, or if you want to add that index, you don't need to go to the table. It's aggregated by GeneXus automatically. So this is for each of the mistakes or errors to improve the experience. The same in terms of navigation. If there is an error, that you're able to solve it right there. I'm Gabriel Medina from Argentina Airport. I want to say something regarding Enrique's comment. One of the things that we lose with the KB, when you export, you no longer have the history of changes you've been making. We wrote sources of objects, who touched it, how long it took, on what date. And with the history, we trust that this was going to stay. But when you export, you lose the history of the object. And then when you import KB, you lose the whole history. Do you know what I mean? That's one thing. It would be good to keep it, to save it. The other question or suggestion, couldn't you improve the viewers regarding HTML about the final product after you modify a web panel or you have a transaction? It's not attractive, you don't see it clearly, especially now with a new form. It's a good form, but you cannot see how the final object will appear. Couldn't you use, for example, Chrome or something like what the Chrome has, a viewer that really shows us the templates of discard that we've had for a long time? It showed how the screen, what the screen would look like, what the final screen would look like. And Gaston Milano said yesterday that this was not useful at all. It was a waste of time. But no, it's not a waste of time. Otherwise, you are blindfolded. I love that question. I love that question. Well, in fact, I'm not going to answer this question. The first part of your question or comment, you answer regarding the export. What we could do is an extension that exports all the revisions of that object. That would be complicated to guarantee the importation, because the previous revisions may depend on other objects that probably are not being exported or no longer exist. This is to answer the first question. Now, in terms of visualization, Christian did in Evolution 3 an Apple window for the abstract forms and for normal forms, and you can see how the screen will look like when you execute it. But I invite you to come to my presentation. I will show some improvements to improve the prototyping cycle to see the effect of a download. And let me add that in this need for traceability of the changes, in the past, GeneXus server helps you a lot. It was meant for that. In your KB, in your local KB, you may be doing several changes. You may be keeping a record of what you did. But instead of doing an export, you do a commit. And you can put comments about what you're doing. And then in the centralized version that the GX server manages, you have a good vision that tells you who changed it, what changed, at what time, which other objects changed, and what changes occurred with each object. So traceability is very thorough. This goes beyond what you said. I'm defending Gaston a little bit. Thank you. The problem with this turb window is that we don't have data. What you see is exactly what you have as a final product. So we are trying to show in the browser what is going to stay. And this should be equal. So, well, attend his presentation and you will see why. Good morning, Gabriel Martinez from ACAR, Mar del Plata, Argentina. Regarding the modules, I did not try them. I just watched the introductory videos. And I think you did this to join KBs, to have several KBs inside. One KB have several KBs. We have several KBs, but all point to a different data store. The module does not manage the data store it works on, or does it? No, it doesn't. In fact, what you have is different modules. We would be modularizing the existing KB. Well, today that's a step to unite so that in a module I can have an external module in a different knowledge base. Well, there are several scenarios for modules. One of such scenarios is the integration of what people in .excel do. You have several knowledge bases and integrate them into one, so that all one pointed to the same data store. And they wanted to reorganize the two knowledge bases into one. So they had the same names and many similarities. So they started putting them into separate modules, which allowed them to have the same name, and they reorganized the knowledge bases. That's one case. A case in which this was used. As Enrique said, maybe we did not devise it for that, but that's the way they used it and it worked. The other case that is going to be useful, for example, I have several knowledge bases and I want to integrate them, but I don't want to integrate them. I want to integrate them from a logical point of view, not from a physical point of view, because some things physically point to one direction, others to another direction. So the module will have data, service interfaces, different types of interface. And when we integrate that to a knowledge base, we don't want that to push us to regenerate objects. We just want to continue the interface, whether it's data or services interface, with a support that is binary, so that the KB I'm integrating does not have overhead. So this data interface may take us to a different data source or the same data source. And this is something that we will be able to configure when we import a module or when we export. As we import, we probably have things that we need to change. I bring it here and the configuration will be one way, or I integrate it in another module and I will be required more information so as to integrate other data from different data sources. So that case of saying, if I want to integrate in one knowledge base and I want to reorganize everything inside it, I can do it today. What I cannot bring is like an interface, because it will bother somehow the current knowledge base. The canonic case would be the GAM. That's a knowledge base. We export interfaces and we consolidate it, and this generates overhead, and this overhead it generates, we don't want it. We want to improve it. So that's where we are heading to. But it's not your case when you have two data sources. You can have that and bring them together and use the same base. But that's not the final way to have it. That's why we say that this is an initial stage.
Sobre los business components. En general, los japoneses desarrollan esto con web panels y con business components, no con otro tipo de transacciones. Y aquí hay un problema, por ejemplo. En el caso de los foreign attributes, se toma un atributo diferente muchas veces. Y
Japanese developers want to interactive.
Nosotros lo que queremos tener es una forma interactiva para ese business component. Armin is saying, yes, yes. I don't know whether he understood everything. So you want to have interactivity in business components. Okay.
Nosotros estamos...
We are trying to add some improvements into the language around transactions and some improvements in business components. We've always wanted that whenever I drag one business component to a web panel, it will behave as if it were the interactive part of a transaction. We have studied that. We haven't made much progress along that line yet, but we will consider that if it is, because it's something that we've wanted to do. I think there are also new paths that we are exploring and maybe will solve some of the difficulties as to that way of programming. So there might be changes there, but we still have to study that.
Bom dia.
Good morning. I will speak in Portuguese because I am from Brazil. I have a question for Luis. Because I'm in terms of the internet. My question is, when there are several applets with different versions in a single KB, would you advise me to publish all in the same backend, or every applet should have a different applet in a single KB? I would like to rephrase the question just to make sure I understood you. You're talking about different versions of GeneXus? You mean different KBs? One KB with several applets. And several users? Several applets with different versions and a single KB. So, versions of each applet. Yes. So you want to know how to solve that deploy. So my doubt is whether we should put all of them in one backend or each applet within different backends but within the same KB. But they're different applications. No, I understood that you had different applications from a single KB, right? Yes. Because if you put them all in, you're wondering whether to put them in the same backend. Yes. This is something about infrastructure, but you're saying that they have different versions. Those applets have different versions, right? This is what you said. If an application was using a common object with another one, but with different versions, they each will need to have a separate backend. If they were all in the same version, then they would be able to use the same backend. But since they have different versions, you need to consider which are the changes among those versions. What are these applets? Web, applications, smart devices. Okay. Because in general, here, in terms of the evolution of those applications, it really varies. It will depend on the moment when they are uploaded to the store. So there are moments when the application is being approved, so it wouldn't be advisable, at least not from my point of view, to have it share, at least not at that time, until they're all moving together. Of course, I need to see the reality, because sometimes this is not possible. There are structural changes being made, because if an application is sent for approval and you continue to develop maybe for another platform, you would have to freeze that, and then at least in terms of services, you would have to think about having another virtual directory because of what might be approved on another end and you're touching. So it's like touching up something that's still in production. So in general, you're generating another web app in order to sustain that. we are actually thinking about ways to facilitate those things and deploy. And one of the scenarios is that one, to detect that the new version of the smart device application will work against a different KB, either temporarily or as those two versions coexist, you will need to have a duplicate backend. So you need to detect those cases and solve that. We have a whole research line along that in order to develop automatic services for that. Thank you. Thank you. You have answered my question. Gabriel Labrada, have you thought about adding exception management to the language or something around what Java.net has? Yes, we have thought quite a lot about that. And so far, we're working in different ways of error management. And here we have some ideas, not in terms of exceptions. We think that exceptions, of course, they're not ruled out in terms of some constructions, but we're thinking more of something in terms of what happens when you do new when duplicate or some of those things. And we're thinking about what happens when these are network exceptions, programming, low-level exceptions. In terms of high-level exceptions, they should be handled internally in GeneXus programming. Some of them, those that are things that are impossible to achieve, of course, we should channel that. There's quite a lot of literature written about that. Most object-oriented programming languages have that. But of course, a lot has been written about why this complicates reading so much. I was one of those who thought that we had to include exceptions at a certain point. But now, after worked so much, I think that there's a negative side to them. This is not a totally closed thing, but if I had to decide that today, this is not something that's good for one language. My name is Sebastián Cardelo from Mendoza, ACP. I have 3 questions regarding extensibility. 2 questions and 1 suggestion, actually. First, what happened with GeneXus for GeneXus? Second question is, have you planned to release at some point some documents about Java doc style for the API to build extensions and to build patterns for the tool? Because we have developed external patterns in our company, and the only way that we have found for solving problems is to read code of other open patterns. But we don't have much documents on the API for development. And my suggestion is to suggest the possibility of adding some property to an external object to avoid it from triggering certain specification warnings during use. The example that I have is I have an external object that uses parameters of the type of any object because it is an external object that does labeling, and every time we use it, it sort of says that data types are not matching because it doesn't have a numeric or character type. So we have to tell it to ignore warnings, specifically in the objects that we use. So it would be advisable that the external object has a property that certain type of warning is avoided. You mentioned several things. 1, extensibility, then this about the warnings, and then what happened with GeneXus for GeneXus. It was a project that I really liked at a certain point. Yes, I really liked it as well. It was like GX Public at its time. Yes, that is... I will start with GeneXus for GeneXus, and then you will answer the other part. In terms of GeneXus for GeneXus, it's a project that was left where it was. That's true, because we came upon several elements. GeneXus for GeneXus was something that, and we had to work with the language itself. And when we did the smart devices generator, we built a whole generation of metadata in the KB. And this generated a new horizon for us in the sense that we thought we could have generic programming on top of GeneXus. So this would have more benefits than what you had with GeneXus for GeneXus. Of course, I would have to elaborate more on this, but I don't want to ramble too much. But what we did for smart devices was, in terms of the synchronizer, which is where we do the synchronization. This is a GeneXus program that uses generic business components. I receive one business component. It's not strong typed. And when I'm saying it's not strong typed, I mean that I'm not receiving a customer. I'm doing any load. I can do save. We haven't released it, even though we're using some of its internal features at our internal level. But we still have to complete some of the things. And we need to... what was the other part? Gustavo, you will answer that part of the attributes. We still have to know which are the business components. Yes. We need to know which are the fields for one business component and which are the data type. We have done the minimum necessary for it to work with generic programming in terms of the replicator where smart devices are synchronized, but we're still missing that part that you mentioned. With this, you could actually go through the whole KB. And it's a much sort of lighter way in terms of what we had with GeneXus for GeneXus, where you had to go through the whole API. We think this will be much more powerful, and we will be adding this. But of course, we still need to work a lot on that. Actually, smart devices generators are working with this metadata, which we already have. They know which are those business components, which are the attributes. We could even have screens in GeneXus itself. So that part was sort of left behind. It's like dead, but the reason behind that isn't left behind. And in that case, we could have even more dynamic patterns. Now we move to the part of the extensibility. The short answer is yes, you're right. The not so short answer is we know that there's a gap there. At our first stage, when we started with this, we took the pragmatic approach. We could have said, let's first document everything and make everything neater, because some things are not as neat as we would like them to be. But instead of saying, let's wait for everything to be totally documented and then we will release, we decided to take a pragmatic approach, and we said it's more important to have this released even though we don't have all the documents. We documented as much as we were able to do. We have communication channels for whoever wants to ask. We might provide as much help as we can, and this has enabled the creation of many patterns, user controls, etc. But I do agree with you. At this stage, we should be able to focus more on that, and there's a gap there, and we will be working on it. I will answer the third part. In terms of external objects, if a method receives any object, you shouldn't be getting a warning there. You shouldn't have to click ignore. It shouldn't have... you shouldn't be receiving a warning there. It's because of maybe a bug there that should be repaired. Rubén Budeño from Chile. Two questions. One, It's related to offline syncing for Win applications. Have you considered this for any time? And second, this question is related to procedure management in terms of procedures that give so many values. I have been researching on this, and where I work, we have cloud development in the version 9 and in evolution 1. So we have researched as to how to be able to work with procedures stored that give you many values. The way we were able to solve this was through a web service, but this means a very long cycle. And it's also true that for transactions that have large data volumes, particularly in the real estate sector, I mean tables with 2 million registries, this slows the whole process too much. So this makes applications crash, and I haven't found a solution for this. How can we handle these procedures that are stored? Also taking into account that many times procedures cannot be opened because they are from external providers. So I cannot generate a procedure within GeneXus that will do the same for me. Also, some people have told us that they can work with auxiliary tables, and within those tables, they can work with inner code and then recover the information, retrieve the information. I will respond to the second part. In terms of procedures that are stored and that give you multiple values, we have a solution, a midterm solution. Actually, I will be talking about, well, not directly about stored procedures, but with some of the mechanisms that we're considering, which is to hide a procedure that is stored behind a transaction. And by definition, the transaction supports multiple values. But even though we want to have a beta for that as soon as possible, that's not a short-term solution. For that, the only solution, I don't know that maybe some of our guys here can come up with another solution, but what I think is that you, instead of having a web service, you could have an external object that could do that in an efficient way, so that it even has paginating functions. It's not the smartest thing, but not the most elegant thing, but maybe you could work with that, and this could get you out of the problem that you have. We're thinking of this as a solution, but if I mention something on a long term, I wouldn't be able to solve your problem now. You had mentioned something else, offline synchronization. Yes. For Windows, because we have so many Windows now, the old Windows, Windows 8, Windows Phone, which Windows? Well, right now I'm talking about Windows 7. Windows.net? Windows.net applications? Yes. No. We haven't thought in principle to have synchronization there. Actually, we need to see what this really means, because we will be supporting SQLite in Windows Phone and Windows, maybe Windows 10. So we need to see that. We could have offline Windows functions, but maybe not the Windows you're thinking about. Good morning. My name is Enrique Iglesias from Credimas, Tucumán, Argentina. I would like to make some questions or a suggestion. We use the query object a lot, and we have noticed that some In some things, it's sort of very separate from the development environment and from applications. Specifically, we would like to see if something could be done in order to use data obtained from the query object in other components, not just in Query Viewer, in order to be able to use other viewing components. Also, is it possible to integrate it to the query object with a for each command in order to have reports? And also, would it be possible to have a navigation list for the query object, because we don't have anything left that can be analyzed as to what it does? Yes. All the things that you've mentioned, we have already studied with our team, and the idea is that you can use it with a for each and at a programming level. And based from there, you will be able to use procedure data. It will open the procedure for use. That's among our pending list, and in the next version, that will probably be included. Could you hear anything I said? So you couldn't hear very well. The reply is yes, this will be in the next version. This is something that we are aware that was left out of the scope of Evolution 3. But we would like to be able to use the query object in a programmatic way. So it will become much more integrated to the rest of the usage you will have for it in terms of the rest of the objects. Thank you very much. Antonio Corrado from Salta, in terms of GAM for web applications, taking into account that generally applications menus with the hundreds of options that you could have are always associated to the profiles and roles that users have. The question is, what is missing in GAM so that we can automatically have that in the options menu so that we don't have to have solutions made in other procedures? In terms of users with privileges and in terms of showing something else for other users. Yes, we already have the spec list for that. We still have to materialize it and do it. Some of the things we have thought about GAM, we would like to be able to generate a menu dynamically for accessing the application. Good morning. Ricardo Rivera from Brazil. What's happening in our company is in terms of large KB management. We have generation, specification, build time, etc. A basic problem that we have are in terms of translation. We have 2,000 objects, 3 languages, and sometimes 5 megas. And this has to be generated, compiled, and that means translation problems. Do you have improvements there in terms of translation? I'm sorry, he was speaking in Portuguese. Could you repeat the question, please? Because he did a translation here. He said that you have a long KB with several translations, and there's a whole setting up specification process that's very slow. Yes, we even have up to 5 megas, so there's a very large problem in terms of the consumption of our client. We have 1,200 clients, and we're downloading 5 megas a day, but that's a lot. 5 megas for a simple thing, that's too much. Is it web or mobile? Web. So the whole file is 5 megas, yes, with 3 languages. In terms of the process of setting this up, I can tell you that we're thinking about some improvements so that whatever is stored inside the KB is not that large. In terms of the JavaScript that's generated, maybe they can give you a better question. What I can think now is to configure the program as not expiring, or maybe that it can expire in a longer time. Yes, we need to improve the way we generate JavaScript code. We might have some strategies as to the variables that we're using, but we won't be able to compact so much the literal string because we don't have so many alternatives. Another problem in terms of the management of large KBs, where we have many users developing things, and we need to have recovery sites. And these sometimes generate errors. And is there a possibility to have different versions in the script? We would like to be able to save that historic file in order to work better in the organization of the database. He's trying to translate. So you want to be able to have restore points in order to go back and manage your versions. So what you want is to be able to store. So this is an administrative issue. We have recovery points, but you want to be able to have full traceability. Yes, this is something we have already been requested. This is similar to what was asked about navigations, but this is about the different versions. And we're also thinking in terms of the deploy management service. We were thinking about trying to have traceability of the different versions and as to what was done and when it was done. Thank you. Here. Hello. I have a question regarding the restrictions that the work with for smart devices has in terms of events. There are things that are not supported, some ifs. They need to have Boolean keys or something. There are other more restrictive things. Will that be allowed in the future? You have no microphone there. In Evolution 2, we had quite a large restriction in terms of the things that could be used in a user panel. But in Evolution 3, that restriction was kind of solved because there's a support from operators in terms of comparing Booleans. 95% of methods are working and they can be used in web panels. So that problem has been quite solved. Some things are still missing, but most things have already been solved. Good morning. I'm Ricardo Torres from Salta, Argentina, and my question is about what was mentioned about synchronization. Why, since you have a solution for MySQLite with other databases, could we have a synchronization between two SQL engines for a multi-corporate environment where we need to have those bases synchronized? Could that be possible? Yes, why not? We are open to suggestions. Well, the reason why we're here is to listen to what you have to say and to try to see whether we can do it. I had been asked about that at some point. This was not our priority so far, basically in terms of SQLite. But this technology, this internal technology that we have allows us to do that. So that's a possibility. We haven't ruled it out forever. It was not a goal on the short term. We were not focused on that, but that's possible. So we take note of that. Thank you. That would enable to have win things, etc., for example. I think this should be the last question because I have a presentation right now. 2 questions. One, Why is the data provider mechanism requires to consult external databases to 1 KB? And this data provider mechanism could be integrated within programming itself. So one data provider, apart from the hardcore definition, could it be associated to determine KB, to a certain result from a store procedure or something like that? Instead of the data view that has to be defined externally, wouldn't it be easier to integrate the data provider to programming so that it can be populated from any external mechanism? From a programming point of view, that would seem easy, at least to me. And something else, do you have any idea of doing process of multi-threading, multitasking procedures? We have a case right now where we have processes where GeneXus has one process, does certain things, and until it doesn't finish, it starts to commit. Could we have that in a parallel way so that GeneXus concurrently manages that? Because if we have to do it manually, it takes too long. We need to have flags, etc. Is there any line where we could have that style of batch processes being concurrently done? I will, in my presentation, I will talk about your first question. So I will, in terms of using transactions and data providers in order to access multiple data sources. Regarding your second question, since I won't be mentioning it in my presentation, I will answer it now. In principle, we are not going to add multi-threading because it will be quite difficult in terms of programming. But in terms of why we're using multi-threading, we do want to solve some things, and we are thinking about having solutions around events-oriented programming. Certain actions should trigger certain events, and some people or programs that are interacting with that, and ultimately that's running in parallel in multi-threading in different threads or processes. But you won't have to program the threading in the KB, but I think that you will be able to do something at a higher level and more business-oriented. So when something is triggered, for example, the entry of an invoice and other processes are taking note of that. That is already written. It's already been discussed. We haven't been able to give full closure to that. Nicolas has to really defend that spec that he's written, but until he doesn't do that, we won't be able to present it. But so far, we still have ideas around that. For sure, we will be working in solving this. You have one comment. You have the submit command for prop batch, and that is running in another thread. But for some cases, that could be solved through that. Yeah, but you don't have an event as to when that finishes. You have to do the whole thing manually. Yes, the way of doing this is through submit. There's a clear need to have to wait. Well, maybe not wait, but you need to know what's going on with certain events when that finishes, and obviously to react. I'm being told that this is the end. Thank you very much for joining us, for your questions. We remain at your disposal for the rest of the event. I hope you can enjoy it.